I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. We previously reported about this group called America First Legal Foundation, AFL. It's led by Stephen Miller, a former top Trump aide who is known for his xenophobic and hateful policies. Also a board member of the AFL is Mark Meadows, Donald Trump's former chief of staff. So these are people who are very close to the Trump administration who formed this group, AFL. And AFL, in the report that we previously did, sent a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, to the Department of Justice and to the National Archives. And then they wrote a letter back to the Department of Justice or the National Archives after they received certain documents, making a follow-up request. And they made the allegation that President Biden was directly involved in the search warrant that was executed on Mar-a-Lago on August 8th. And then we showed you in that reporting how the MAGA-controlled House Judiciary Committee would then take that allegation and they would report it as a fact. You see, Biden directly was involved in the raid at Mar-a-Lago, the House Judiciary GOP-controlled members would state. And then you would see Fox and then New York Post and other Rupert Murdoch-controlled media properties all kind of push this out. And then that narrative would develop. And when you actually looked into the letter that was being sent by America First Legal Foundation there, the central thesis was that the Department of Justice was controlled by people that President Biden appointed. President Biden appoints the Attorney General and other top-level officials at the Department of Justice. And however, the current Department of Justice operates very differently than when Bill Barr was in control of it when Donald Trump was in office, where Bill Barr as Attorney General served essentially as Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Well, I've been doing some more digging about this America First Legal Foundation, and what piqued my interest is I read an article the other day in Rolling Stone online, and it came across my feed, and it said, Stephen Miller is taking legal action against the M&M Company. And then it says in the subheadline, the former Trump official is apparently furious about the candy maker's diversity efforts, and he's taking it up with the federal government. And so I was just thinking to myself, he filed a lawsuit against the M&Ms? Like, what is going on here? So I wanted to dig deeper and see what was going on here. So I did some research. I looked up the AFL website, and then I saw it right here. And this is a press release that was issued by America First Legal. And this is what they send to all of the press, hoping to get an article directly like the one that I just read for you. And this is what the press release said. America First Legal files federal civil rights complaint against Mars Inc. for illegal, racist, and sexist hiring practices. It's dated April 27th, 2023. And if you go and you look at it, it says, today, as part of its initiative, the AFL has filed a federal civil rights complaint against Mars Inc. By the way, when it says the AFL, it makes it sound like it's a government institution, and it makes it sound like it's a legal entity, like it's a legal organization made up of lawyers. Stephen Miller's not a lawyer. Mark Meadows is not a lawyer. It goes on to say, the latest complaint follows a long line of others filed by AFL's Center for Legal Equality against woke corporations like Anheuser-Busch, Hershey, Amazon, Starbucks, and others. Under the cloak of equity, woke companies like Mars have been shamelessly discriminating in their employment practices. Then it goes on to cite the Civil Rights Act of 1964 makes it illegal for employers to impose hiring quotas that favor applicants based on individuals' race, color, religion, or sex, or national origin. Yet Mars does just that, openly touting its discriminatory quota to increase racial minority representation among management in its U.S.-based consumer packaged goods business by 40%. And so here you have this Steve Miller group are they filing a lawsuit? We'll get to that in a moment, but they are saying that Mars Inc., the maker of M&Ms, is engaged in discriminatory practices by trying to increase racial minority representation. So that's what Stephen Miller's group is apparently taking some legal action. And then it shows where on the website, for example, that Mars Inc. talks about increasing racial minority representation. And it talks about how it's important that they have, that they improve their workforce representation, how Mars talks about in leadership representation. We've seen an almost 5% increase in both our racial and ethnically underrepresented groups and emerging market talent among our global management population. And goes on to basically say how they're trying to improve their ability to hire more people from diverse backgrounds. And then there's a section where it also talks about how they want to promote more women. And then that's also part of Steve Miller's complaint. And this is what it's saying. Even though Mars's 41% rate of female leadership meets the corporation's own standard for gender balance, it continues to impose quotas favoring female hiring and promotion. And then it cites a section from, I guess, the Mars website where it says 41% of Mars leaders are women, and we've advanced the number of gender balanced leadership teams from 43% to 50% over the past year. We've expanded leadership development training for women across our regions and functions based on our flagship Women Leading Purposefully course. And so here, Steve Miller's group, the AFL, with all of these Trumpers in it, are attacking Mars for trying to promote the leadership by women within the company, and they're calling it a manipulation of the composition of the company. But then and then it also talks about their initiatives to give back to diverse communities as well. But then I want to go, okay, let me see. So the headline here is America First Legal files federal civil rights complaint against Mars Inc. Okay, a federal civil rights complaint. So let's actually open up the complaint, shall we? Read the EEOC complaint here. Oh, wait a minute. It's a letter. It is a letter. And the letter is a letter to the field office director, or the regional field office director at the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, basically just whining about all of the things. So they want to call that a federal civil rights complaint, as though they are an actual attorney, and they put forward all the stuff that I just talked to you about right there. And it's really just a letter that's being sent to an EEOC just complaining about the company. So then if you dig deeper, though, and you start looking at some of these headlines, and I was like, let me see if this pattern has just repeated itself over and over again. And boom, here's another example. Reuters, Starbucks diversity program targeted by former Trump aides legal group. And so when you go and you look at the AFL website, what do you see there as well? You know, basically the same exact thing, where they have the headline that talks about the case that they're bringing against Starbucks. They then mention that, that it's discriminating because it has all of these hiring practices that try to improve and promote diversity hiring practices. And then you go to it, and what do you see? Yes, you see a letter that's sent to the EEOC. And then this pattern has been repeating over and over and over again for the past essentially 3 years. America First Legal files federal civil rights complaint against Anheuser-Busch for illegal racist and sexist hiring practices. And if you go to this press release that it puts out as well, it talks about how in Anheuser-Busch's 2022 annual report, the company highlights diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as a global priority. And then it says the company affirms that its strategies have driven results that include increasing overall representation of women in top leadership positions. And then it talks about, that this is where it's attacking the company for saying things like the brand's new Step Up to the Plate program will look to propel the next generation of Hispanic sports executives. Then you go, let's take a look at the complaint. And once again, the complaint is a letter. This pattern repeats company after company, and they just go around filing these EEOC letters that they call federal civil rights complaints. They put out a press release, hoping the press picks it up, treats it as though it is a federal civil rights lawsuit, as though the company is now being sued, that then becomes a national story, like the one that we just discussed. Then Fox and and New York Post and everyone writes about it, and then it divides the country. The goal of this clearly is essentially just to create a culture war. The lawsuit, what they realize, what Steve Miller realizes, is that the press loves to write about the headline. And Donald Trump's become a master at that too. Donald Trump sues people purely for the headline, because you almost never hear about that he loses every one of these cases that he files, but he gets the headline. Donald Trump sued this person. Donald Trump sued this person. Donald Trump has filed a lawsuit. Then he goes to his supporters and he points to the press and you go, see, I filed it. And when you file these EEOC letters, which go nowhere, the EEOC, they're frivolous letters. The EEOC's not acting on this. The EEOC's deadlocked as it is, and they're certainly not acting on things that are completely frivolous like this. But that's not what they're going to do. They're trying to get the headline. They're trying to get Murdoch and Fox and everyone to write about it. And then they're frankly trying to get people who are angry at these types of filings to write about it too, to divide the country. One of the things that's interesting too when you look into this entity, America First Legal, they're a 501c3. And so I did some digging here too. The Department of the Treasury, IRS, Internal Revenue Service, they sent this letter to them and said, "We're pleased to tell you we've determined you're exempt from federal income tax under Internal Revenue Code Section 501c3. Donors can deduct contributions they make to you under IRC Section 170. You're also qualified to receive tax-deductible bequests, devices, transfers, or gifts under Section 2055. And so they're a tax-exempt entity, and people who donate to them can deduct it from their taxes. I want you to think about that. And just so you know, one of the big no-nos for a nonprofit organization, in return for a favored tax status, a 501c3 is not allowed to engage in any political campaign activity or political activity at all, favoring one political party over another. And so just looking at that, I don't know how this isn't a political organization. You look at just their finances on their 990 form from 2001, and their revenue was about $6 million in 2021 alone. And this is a pattern that they repeat over and over again. One other thing too, when you go to this AFL Legal Org website, there's a section for cases. And so they almost present themselves like they have cases, like they're filing lawsuits. And it's like, Miller's not a lawsuit. Meadows isn't a lawyer. Miller isn't a lawyer. Meadows isn't a lawyer. So what are these lawsuits? And then if you go to the cases section, what you'll see is that all of the so-called cases, again, are letters. They're Freedom of Information Act letters. They're FOIA letters, making requests of different government agencies. But again, what the purpose here is to manipulate the media. And they do it through the House Judiciary GOP, through the House Republicans, who take that request and then they put them out as though these are like official civil rights cases. And so I just wanted to show you that this is what's been going on behind the scenes for 2 or 3 years. And so that you're wise to it. When you see it, you know what's really going on here. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 1.5 million subscribers thanks to your incredible support. Check us out as well at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch, and also wherever you get your audio podcasts, you can search for us at MeidasTouch Podcast. All right, hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free. Have a great day.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.